Welcome to the From the Hart podcast presented by Orange Kiwi Consulting and Crisp Imaging. Orange Kiwi Consulting is dedicated to guiding family and closely held businesses through significant transitions. You can learn more about their services by visiting their website at orangekiwillc.com. Crisp Imaging is a family-owned reprographics and digital printing provider. They specialize in both large and small format printing, document management, scanning, and archiving. Renowned for their customer-centric approach and top-notch services, Crisp Imaging offers solutions for everything from construction plans and specification books to large-scale exterior graphics and vehicle wraps. For more information, visit their website at crispimg.com. And now, here's the host of the From the Hart podcast, my husband, Ed Hart.
Hi, friends. Welcome to this episode of the From the Hart podcast presented by Orange Kiwi Consulting and Crisp Imaging. Today, I have a guest with me I actually had on about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's been a long time and a lot of things have happened in our world since we spoke last. So my guest today is the CEO of the Orange County Community Foundation, Shelley Hoss. Shelley, it's nice to see you. I saw you last week at the National Philanthropy Day big gala, which was wonderful to get a chance to see you in real life and in person, but it's nice to have you with us today. So welcome.
It's a pleasure to be back. And as you said, so much water has passed under the bridge since we spoke last. We'll have a lot of new topics to cover, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So just a little bit about Shelley. If my notes are correct, Shelley took over started the Orange County Community Foundation in the year 2000. So hard to believe 25 years have gone by that you've been in that leadership role. Prior to that, she was the executive director of Girls Inc. in Orange County. And then prior to that, associate executive director at the Orangewood Children's Foundation. So you have made a life of working in philanthropy. Can you tell me a little bit about how you undergrad from UC Riverside, MBA from UC Irvine? Did you know when you were in school that this was the path you were going to take?
Well, at that time, which is 40 years ago now, the nonprofit career track wasn't as well known as I think a professional choice or option. I had in my undergrad years a feeling that I wanted to do something that made a difference. My bachelor's was in administrative studies, which was UC Riverside's business degree, and I loved it. It was very open architecture. You could take sociology and psychology along with your macroeconomics and finance. So it was a very well-balanced degree. And then I did something very similar at UC Irvine for my master's. They had a blended master's that was the core curriculum for both the MBA and the MPA, the Master's in Public Administration. So I was continuing to seek out this idea that I knew my strengths and skills were in leadership and organization and analysis. And so I thought that sort of business leadership set of skills was going to be foundational to my career. But it was very important to me that it was in an area that made a difference, which is now as sort of de rigueur in MBA programs. You know, we have terms like social enterprise, social impact, and there's a blending of this idea of purpose with your professional life. But 40 years ago, that wasn't as common a consideration. So I was driven by, I think, something that I didn't know how to put language to. But my world really changed when I spent my summer between undergrad and my graduate program volunteering at a camp for children in the foster care system. And that is where my eyes really were opened about the nonprofit world and how the transformational impact of nonprofit work. And so I really, as I started my master's program, I really dug in. That's what led me to my first 10 years of my career at Orangewood, because most of these children had come through Orangewood. I did a research paper on the building of the Orangewood Children's Home as a public-private partnership, very unique, a county shelter, but that was built by the private sector and gifted to the county, 80% with private funding in the early 80s. And I was really captivated by the model and got to know the organization and its leaders in writing a research project, and then sort of begged for a job making $5 an hour in the summer between my first and second year in my master's program, and never looked back. And that was, it'll be 40 40 years ago next summer. So
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you for your life of service as well. I mean, we
thank
always
you.
thank our military and our police and fire, but I think those that are working with some of the most underserved areas in our population deserve just as much gratitude. So, on behalf of everybody, thank you
Oh,
for your
thank
life of
you.
service in that area as
Well,
well.
probably very much like the philanthropists I've worked with throughout my career, I would say, as they do, that I have, without doubt, received more fulfillment and blessing and enrichment and learning as I have given. So, more than a fair trade.
You were quoted in Orange Coast Magazine in an article, or the headline actually said, "The face of Orange County philanthropy." So,
Oh,
with that, I have a
golly.
question for you. I know that's pretty big. That's pretty big responsibility, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So 40 years of experience, 25 in the current role, current organization. I didn't have this in my list of questions, but something that hit me while you were talking is, where do you, Shelley, see the biggest need that's not being met or not being met as well as maybe it could be when it comes
Mm,
to, I mean, you've worked with foster, you've worked with, homeless, you've worked with every aspect of area where there's obviously a big need. Is there an area that you feel is not as served as maybe it could be or should be? Let's start in Orange County because that's where we
yeah.
are, but
Yeah.
across the nation.
Well, I'm going to tell you what is really sort of the red light on our dashboard right now, though sort of asking to choose one need as more important than another is like asking parents
Who's your
with multiple
who's your
children for
favorite
their
kid,
favorite
right?
child. I have only one, so I
Yeah,
have an easy
yeah,
answer to that
yeah.
question.
It's the one that
But
hasn't aggravated me. Yep.
but actually I do have an answer for that that is really central to Orange County Community Foundation's game plan for the next 5 years. So we're revealing this week our Vision 2030, our game plan for the next 5 years. And a major component of that is our commitment to our work here in Orange County. As you know, and we may talk later about OCCF's role helping philanthropists with their goals, their philanthropic dreams, wherever they might be in Orange County, across the nation, around the world. But our work and our own grant making and leadership work is really focused on Orange County. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what this community needs. Some of it is very related to what's going on of the moment. We've just, been through a crisis in facing our families who are food insecure based on the delay in the SNAP benefit. So these issues, some are sort of rolling waves that crest based on external factors like what may be happening legislatively or in other environments. But I'll tell you, we are thinking a lot about one particular need, which is the area of youth mental health. And this really jumped off the radar for us about 3 years ago. We had replicated a study that we had done more than 10 years ago in partnership with McKinsey, who not Mackenzie, not Jenny and
Not
Katie's
Jenny and Katie
company,
McKenzie,
although
although
they're a
yeah,
great another great sort of research, but McKinsey spelled MCK
right.
that many know about. Were sort of a gifted relationship through a partnership with Edwards Life Sciences, and they helped us compile, aggregate, and analyze community level data. And we released that as our first community report in 2012. We replicated it in 2022, looking at just on the sort of cresting over the other side of the pandemic and looked at how the needs had shifted in a decade. And the major flag that came out of all of the data was this crisis with children and youth mental health. This is not a surprise to anyone who is reading the news or talking to your neighbors. This is a well-known crisis nationally for sure, and the same showing up here in Orange County. So as we were looking at our body of work of the next 5 years, there were 5 areas that came very easily as work that was in progress, where we have partnerships with local donors and community leaders, work that we could build on, and one area that we couldn't imagine leaving off of our menu of our local impact. So we added child and youth mental health as one of the core initiatives for the next 5 years. Although we are brand new to it, it's distinct from all of our other initiatives because we have no deep subject matter expertise. We're new to the topic. We are we're certainly not new to the awareness of
Right.
the need, but as far as making decisions about where philanthropy in particular can move the needle. So there are complexities because the bulk of the funding to address these needs is coming through major health systems, through government streams of funding. And so trying to wrap arms around a complex issue that has many layers and levels to it and is intersected with all kinds of other risk factors, and where it's really complex to think about how philanthropy can move the needle. We decided that level of difficulty meant it was imperative for us to try to provide some leadership. So I will there I that is a very natural answer to your question.
From your research, your opinion, your ideas, I have mine. Three factors come to mind for me right away that are creating a lot of these mental health issues, not only in youth, but in adults as well. One was obviously COVID. We just
Mm-hmm.
shifted the way we
Mm-hmm.
did everything from outward facing and people centric to inward. And while that probably was mentally a gift for some, it was certainly challenging for many.
Mm-hmm.
Two is social media. Everybody thinks everybody else's life is better than theirs.
Yeah.
So that comparison. And then we have, I think, another pandemic across the world that's been going on a long time, and that is broken homes. And those are areas that break my heart big time. Are those three? And if you could kind of look at those and kind of where you think the big issue is, are there other areas as well that you think are contributing
Yeah.
to that youth mental health?
Well, you raise a great question that I certainly am not a subject matter expert in. So, one of our invitations to folks is to learn with us. So, we
Yeah,
have three sort of calls to action as we're going to roll out our 5 year plan. Learn with us. If you're interested and you want to know, share with us if you have expertise, and then give with us if this is an issue area you want to impact. So I think it would be hard to argue that what you've mentioned are contributing factors. Families that are struggling economically.
yeah,
Certainly, I can't not name the recent factor of the aggressive immigration enforcement, which
sure.
is striking vulnerable families, causing fear. We have families not sending their kids to school, families that have legal status and yet are still being paralyzed by fear. We have faith leaders advising their communities not to come to church. I mean, this is an unprecedented
Right.
sense of really the voices of our community says that they feel they're being hunted. I mean, I've heard these stories firsthand, including people who've been detained who are U.S. citizens who've been torn from their children, their families. So I can't raise this in Orange County without naming that that has been a contributing factor over this past 6 months for sure. The effects of the pandemic, I don't know how many decades or years or decades it will take us to fully understand the impacts on families, the job loss, the economic insecurity, the sometimes vulnerability to being unhoused. I mean, if you are housing insecure and food unstable, everyone's mental health in the family is affected, and parents'
Yeah.
mental health has an enormous implications on their children. The rise in domestic violence that occurred during the pandemic when there was a
No
drop in
escape.
reporting, not
Yeah.
because there was a drop in relationship violence and family violence, but because there just wasn't as much eyes on.
Right.
And this is probably just the scratching of the surface. I think that as we get in and we spend the next 5 years not just acting but continuing to learn, I will love to come back and share with you or bring an expert who
Sure.
can
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
actually give a well-founded response. What is clear is that the suicidal ideation, the suicide attempts, this is becoming a leading cause of death for children and youth. And something that I've learned we tend to hear the really dramatic, heart-wrenching stories of a teen, a young person who's died by suicide, and then are trying to roll back and see, when could that have been discovered. What is often missing is attention to those younger children. The experts that we're talking to in at Chalk in the school system are saying we are seeing mental health needs in children as young as 4 and 5, but they're just often there's not the resources. Parents don't know how to address it. Schools aren't equipped. And what we know, a tiny ray of hope in an otherwise really daunting topic, is that the neuroplasticity of children and the efficacy of early intervention is a cause for incredible hope and promise because if we can get to it earlier, then
Right.
we're not seeing the sort of multiplier effect of children who are doing poorly in school. They're socially isolated. They are having trouble at home. They're maybe it is sort of iterative. Their issues are creating stress in the home, which is causing everyone's mental health to decline. And then by the time these kids are in middle school or high school, we're seeing these a hole that becomes so difficult to crawl out of. And so, as we've talked to mental health professionals and educators, they're really, really advocating for building up systems that help identify some of these issues earlier on before this whole movie has sort of played out and this plot line has advanced to a point that there's just such deep, deep pain for everyone in the family. So, we're really thinking about how do we understand better how to impact this issue at an earlier stage of life? How do we partner with our mental health professionals, with nonprofits, with health systems, with schools? And we are just like, we are in the early stages of figuring that out. And we will have more to share. And we should add, one of the things we're doing in concert with our 5-year plan is partnering with OC World to publish and produce a series of 6 documentaries on these areas that we see of greatest need in our community and the places where philanthropy can actually move the needle and help lift our neighbors in need and help move people from really struggling to thriving, which lifts our community to a place of thriving economically and civically and socially and just, as our quality of life, all of us from a health and well-being perspective, we are going to be diving into each of these areas and made the choice to start with youth mental health, the topic we know the least about. Thought maybe we could learn together in producing a documentary that will then educate our community. It's going to educate us as we are developing the content. So we're really trying to practice what we preach and start with kind of beginner's mind and open to understanding all of the complex factors and most importantly where we can shine the light and lean in to strategies that can help our most vulnerable children and families to find some hope and a path forward.
Yeah, I heard an analogy recently. I heard a poem called The Ambulance Down in the Valley, which I've talked about on the podcast before, but I heard it recently in a different way as we spend so much time downriver pulling people out of the river and rescuing them. We need to go upriver and figure out why they're
Yeah.
falling in
Yeah.
and
And
prevent them from falling
it's
in.
really hard. I mean, when we, all resources are limited to some capacity. And so when we
Sure.
think about even, the community foundations, time and resources, donors and folks that could be leaning in philanthropically, it's so hard to look at this crisis for our teens and say, okay, and of course we're going to try to create ways for people to act across that life stage, that full spectrum, because some people will say my, passion because of an incident in our family or something we're aware of. But I don't know. I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with Rick and Kay Warren's story of losing their son Matthew to suicide.
Yeah.
And Kay speaks so passionately about this and says, we saw signs when Matthew was 4. And I have records of our advocacy and our searching back to when Matthew was 4, talking to teachers, talking to doctors, talking to anyone who would listen. And we were constantly dismissed with it's behavioral cognitive, it's something that Matthew will grow out of, it's something else. And this is why they are such ardent champions. And in fact, the first inpatient mental health beds for children under the age of 12 were opened at Chalk through a direct appeal by Rick and Kay, who gathered all the hospitals together after Matthew's death and said, we have to do better as a community. We have to start having some resources. And Dr. Maria Mignon, who was then the chief medical officer at Chalk, who's on my board, said, let's do it. Chalk should be the vanguard here, and let's figure out how to open mental health beds. Their first inpatient resident
Mm.
was 5 years old, a child
Wow.
who had tried to take her life at the age of 5. There was abuse happening in the home, and this was the sign. And they were there to wrap around this child and the family. So it's so compelling. It's a hard topic, though, I have to tell you.
It
Like, there
is.
are some of these conversations we walk away from, and I'm just buckling because it is. But it's like many of our difficult topics. I could have answered this question in 100 different
Right.
ways. Human trafficking is the same issue where it's so uncomfortable. We do a lot of work with the Samueli Foundation, and this is a particular passion of Susan Samueli's, and she's just keeping that conversation open. And it's just hard. It's hard for men, it's hard for women, it's hard for people who've experienced some form of victimization. But if we can at least have the courage to talk about it, how in the world do we expect anyone who needs to find a way out of these horrible experiences to find their courage?
You're saying so many things that I'm writing down, so I appreciate that. But
See
keeping the
what
conversation.
see what Pandora's box you open when you ask
Right.
about
See, I
greatest
ask a
need.
question and I get an answer I wasn't expecting. I
Oh,
wrote the words "keep the conversation open." You talked about Rick and Kay Warren. Our pastor, I may have shared this with you when we spoke before. Lorianne, my wife, and I attended a church in Chino Hills, and our pastor died by suicide in 2018. He was about
oh,
30 years
Ed.
old, three young boys. And yeah, it was
Oh,
tough. It was
Ed.
anytime the topic of suicide comes up,
Yeah,
I I have a biological feeling that comes up for me because of the pain
yeah,
of our friend, this young
yeah,
pastor. We knew him. I talked to him days before. I mean, a lot days before.
yeah.
And Kay came out and spoke at our church shortly thereafter because she could talk from the space of empathy for what we as a church family were going through when we
That's right.
lost Andrew. Keeping that conversation open is so, so
Yeah.
important. I love a quote that I also read about you that I want to dive into a little bit. It says,
And Ed, before you do that, do you mind me interrupting you on
no,
your
not at
own
all.
podcast? But since we're here, I just want to
Please.
mark this part of having a healing and constructive conversation is thinking about the language we use. So that I'm going to just take this moment because this is something I've
Please
learned
do.
in our process thus far, which is the language died by suicide. I spoke it, you reflected it. I
Yeah.
think that's really important because our prior accepted language was committed
Commit,
suicide.
right.
And there is
I've
an
had to get out of
underlying
that paradigm
blaming,
too.
right? When you say committed suicide, there is an inherent sort of sense of blame. And this was a choice, this person. And I know, we could have another long conversation, which we won't, but often people who die by suicide believe that they truly believe that others who they love deeply will be better off. They truly believe that, and they're in a state of delusion based on what's going on for them in their mental health or whatever diagnosis they're struggling with or other affliction. And I think it's really important that we continue to reinforce this so that we identify with the suffering and not cast blame
Not
in
the
some
act.
way about
Yeah.
that act, that was their final act of desperation, a final surrender to something a struggle that they could no longer hold. And so I think it's just really, I didn't want to leave this
I
topic. And
appreciate
yes,
that.
let's move forward from it. But that's a thing that we can do. We can honor people's truth and those who've been left by someone who died by suicide and are struggling with that. It's affirming to use the language that
Yeah.
we understand is more helpful.
Yeah, I lost a good buddy about that same time, and our pastor and another family member right around that
Mm,
same time to suicide. And I read a study recently, since we're staying on this topic for another minute, of people who attempted suicide and survived. And
mm.
the percentage, I don't remember what the number, but a very, very high percentage, like above 90%, regretted the moment. Like, for example, someone jumped
Oh,
off a bridge and they survived. And the minute
mm,
their feet left the bridge, they went to, oh my gosh, what have I done?
yeah.
And the
Wow.
flash in their mind of all the people who are going to be impacted. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's we've all heard the term. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and but the ripple that it leaves behind. I mean, to your point, I mean, even to what I said a second ago when the topic came up, I had a physiological response that wasn't positive, just
Yeah.
when I hear the word.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yes.
I think about this 5-year-old you talked about, and I think about just our pastor who, at 30, or my old college buddy who was in his 50s, or I
Yeah.
mean, it's a hard world we're in, and it's not getting easier.
Yeah.
And
And one gift we can give beyond this topic and to so many others
yeah,
is the courage to walk with people and to be someone that people can talk to about whatever is going on. early in my professional life in my 20s, was had the blessing of working with an incredible leader who had lost her son, her only child, to an accident when he was just 21. And she was just 3 years into that eternal, lifelong grieving process. And something she shared with me stuck with me. So I guess we're having a different podcast than we thought we
Right?
were
That's
having, because
okay.
now
We'll reel it back
we're
in a
just,
minute. Yeah. So
well, this is, I
we're going
just
to cheer
believe
you
in
all up in a minute here.
going where the Spirit leads us. And so
Yeah.
we don't know who's going to listen to this and who needs
100%
to hear
agree.
this. So I think we just go with it. But she shared something, this is now 35 years later, it's never left me. She said one of the things that was the biggest surprise after losing her son was the friends who she had thought would be with her through thick and thin, who just began to distance. And not that they didn't care, but they were so uncomfortable. They didn't know how to walk with her in her grief. They didn't know how to hold the grief of a mother losing her only child. And so they distanced. And I remember hearing that and just like seeing the moment, like if we can each be someone who commits to try to be someone who could stand with someone in their unimaginable pain. And it's not ours, but we have a choice to make
Yeah.
when someone is going through something that might, it gives us a huge physiological response. We have to deal with our own stuff. It might be absolutely abhorrent to us. I mean, I'm not saying we should do this to our own loss of our own mental health, but when there's a moment that you could choose to be with someone in a difficult moment, you mentioned, friends from early in your life. I have a high school friend who we don't see each other often, but we've stayed in touch. And she just lost her 24-year-old daughter to a very unexpected medical condition. And I just thought, okay, there's a call. I can be somebody who I went to the service. I didn't know her daughter at all, but I went to the service and gave her just, the best hug of my life. And
Yeah.
she told me afterwards that hug stayed with her the entire day. And like, when can I be with you? Just that gift of presence of like, I will be by your side. And sometimes it's literally just saying, I am here and showing up for somebody. So you've just shared some traumas that you've had, and I suspect you were someone who stood with those families and stood with your community, your faith community, these friends, these circle, even in the midst of your own loss.
Well, and I'm a big believer that every gift that we receive has multiple purposes, and one is for us to pass it on.
Mhm.
And a quote that I was getting to a second ago with you, I think it's a good time to bring it up, is you were quoted as saying, I gained confidence at a young age because I always felt my voice mattered.
Mhm.
And you've been given that gift of having a voice that matters. And so I see you, and I try to be this person as well. That's one of the reasons why I have a podcast, is so that people like you and others can use that gift of voice to let other people have a voice. And so much of what we can do is just listen.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
so
the
right,
greatest
Eric.
gift anybody's ever given me is just asking, how can I help? And then listening.
Yeah. And being aware, yes, and having a mindset to be aware if there's someone in a room or in our, circle of relationships who doesn't feel that they have that voice. And there's lots of reasons where people don't feel welcomed into a conversation, don't feel that they have the platform to speak freely, and to be a person who's noticing, looking for that,
Yeah.
and calling people forward. It could be style, it could be being in a marginalized group where they feel that they just haven't had the same welcome to speak, and being someone who creates a sense of welcome and invites people into conversations. That that is, to me, it's we can talk about things we accomplish in our careers, but that being someone who's aware of being present for others, to me, that is such a gift. It's probably one of the things that is the most fulfilling to me in my life now. I mean, I'm 62 and I came out talking. So like I've
You
had
me
my
both.
voice is, my voice has had plenty of time to be aired. And somewhat ironic that I'm saying this in the middle of a monologue, but when I'm not being recorded on a podcast and specifically asked questions, I really find it so it's like a scavenger hunt. Where could I use my opportunity to give someone else an opening and an invitation to contribute. It's a very cool thing to be able to do at a certain stage in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of goes back to where much is given, much is required. I mean, we've been given so many opportunities and blessings, and again, a voice like you said in that quote, that just being able to be there for other people is so important. So you mentioned when I saw you last week at
Yeah,
National Philanthropy Day and today before we started recording, and you touched on maybe this is it a little bit, this maybe not, but you've got at the time that we're recording this, it's pre-announcement, but by the time we
yeah,
air this, it's post-announcement. You're going to make
yeah.
it a big event coming up. So
Yes.
share with us this big news that you want to share.
Oh, thank you. Well, we had our 35th anniversary. The Community Foundation turned 35 last fall, and we had our prior plan that was called Vision 2024, big things we wanted to have accomplished for our mission for this community, the centerpiece of which was reaching $1 billion in cumulative granting. When I started, by the way, in 2000, May of 2000, we'd granted 20 million in our first 10 years. Not surprising because it was a building period,
Sure,
but the incredible generosity of this community has propelled us to really significant growth to become one of the largest and fastest growing community foundations in the country among 900 peers. And so we looked for this milestone, and at the time we set it, we had just crossed 500 million in granting, and we thought it took us 28 years to get to 500 million. What if we doubled that in a quarter of the time? It's as good a goal
hey,
as
if
any.
you don't have the vision, it's not going to happen, right?
So that was part of our Vision 2024. We announced it on our 30th anniversary and said we're pushing hard, and we actually reached it a year and a half early. So by the time,
Congratulations. Wow.
thank you. So by the time we got to our 35th anniversary, we had already surpassed it by another 100 million in granting, and it's 100% due to the generosity of this Orange County community, which is comprised primarily of people you know from your work with family businesses,
Sure.
first generation wealth creators. Most of those who are our philanthropists and our leaders, our business leaders in Orange County came from very humble beginnings. Many of them went to school on scholarships, worked themselves through college, started their businesses, started their real estate investments, started their businesses with very little, and are very self-made, and it makes them incredibly generous because after they make sure the kids and grandkids are going to college and stable, they're not trying to create dynastic family wealth. They're trying to help other people rise. And so as we crossed that threshold last year, announced, well, we decided to add another 100 million onto the total. We turned our attention to the next 5 years. And so we're going to be announcing this week our Vision 2030. Spent about a year considering where we ought to be focusing and really decided to set our intention on three areas. How do we, number one, amplify giving? How do we support this already incredibly philanthropic community to do even more, to be even more aspirational, to be more connected, more rewarded, and more inspired by their giving? So how do we be an engine for growing philanthropy in Orange County? Number two, and how do we engage those donors so that they are really making the highest impact in their giving? Again, whether that's locally, nationally, or abroad. And then thirdly, how do we turn our attention to the needs of our Orange County community and those six initiatives that I'll describe. And then our president, Tammy Tumbling, my incredible partner who's been with me for 6 years and been our president since last year, overseeing all of our internal operations, says we cannot forget the operational excellence because that is the foundation of all of this work, and making sure
Right.
our the stuff that you don't see on the outside as much, but the technology infrastructure, the quality assurance, the stewardship, all of that underpins this incredible role of holding now in excess of 800 million in
Hmm.
philanthropic wealth in Orange County. So this will be in the rear view by the time this airs, but we're going to announce that we just crossed another milestone in our cumulative granting. We've now added another $250 million to that total. So we've granted $1.25 billion.
Amazing.
We need to go back. At the time we set the goal, there were only 35 community foundations in the country that reached $1 billion. We'll have to go back out and look who's reached $1.25 billion. And I guess our next
Yeah. The numbers are
stop is
dwindling, I'm sure.
1.5 billion. So that's been an enormous focus for us, is growing that giving. And then as far as locally, we're the Orange County Community Foundation, not because our donors have to only give in Orange County, but because Orange County is our shared home. And so always that will be the home of our heart and where our local attention is focused. So I mentioned the brand new initiative in youth mental health, but that's joining 5 other areas that we're going to be leaning into over the next 5 years, building on some existing work, but trying to really expand our impact. So the first is economic opportunity. We launched this work back in 2018, seeing this huge gap in middle skills jobs where we have employers that are offering living wage jobs that do not require a 4-year degree. They require some education and probably an apprenticeship. Think about healthcare, IT, advanced manufacturing, some of these industries that are booming still in Orange County.
Right.
And at the time we looked at this, there were upwards of 17,000 unfilled middle skills jobs where we have a huge crisis of unemployment and underemployment in communities, especially kind of like our urban center in Orange County. It's a huge swing and a miss. I mean, we have the local talent, we just don't, they're just missing
Matching
that
the
little
talent with the need and how do they
with
fund
a
each
little
other?
bit of a bridge. And so we
Yeah.
engaged relationships with community colleges and started leaning heavily into this. And the results have just been astonishing. Yeah, I know you have a great affinity for Fullerton. One of the programs we funded was we seeded a drone apprenticeship program at Fullerton College that is now been securing, huge 6-figure grants to build on our initial seed funding, that is churning out fully licensed with their FAA commercial drone pilot license and their own commercial drone, which you have to have, and partnerships with Edison and other companies. Little known fact, Edison is now surveilling its electricity grid using drones, not guys driving around in trucks.
Huh.
And a lot of these jobs that we've been funding, they're starting at, 80, 85, $90,000 without a college degree, with benefits and,
Hmm.
upward mobility. I mean, it's a huge engine for
Yeah.
success and multi-generational lifting. So we're going to be, and we have an additional part of that work that is for minority-owned small businesses in partnership with CLO, or an incredible nonprofit. So
Yeah.
that's area one. Area two, educational access, really helping, whether it's for these kinds of vocational programs or 4-year degrees, helping kids that haven't seen college in their future get there, persist, and complete whatever their aspiration is. Thirdly, women's health. And especially building on, we've done a lot of work in maternal health and sort of earlier stage women's health. But our population in Orange County, we're sort of part of this silver tsunami where, because of our population characteristics, we are aging proportionately faster than the state or the nation. And certainly the access to health benefits is not equitably distributed. And so we have a lot of women who are living in poverty, who are aging with health concerns and don't have the access. So thinking about sort of full spectrum healthcare for our women who are going to be, still surviving, in many cases, their spouses. And so we need them to be healthy and vibrant parts of our community. Fourth area, environmental stewardship. We've had a long history, one of our funds dedicated to endangered species. Now we're thinking more broadly about, bequeathing a healthy, thriving Orange County ecosystem to future generations, and how do we grow, knowledgeable stewards of our local environment, and make sure it's protected for generations to come. And then finally, besides the youth mental health that I already
Yeah.
mentioned, community power building, which is our work to engage local communities in the decisions that affect them and help them through great partners like OCO, which works through faith communities to help folks speak up at city council meetings and get involved in decisions that are affecting their lives. So that sort of grassroots civic engagement. It's really democracy 101, grassroots. It's not political,
Sure.
it's just empowerment and helping people. Again, we were talking a lot earlier about voice, helping people find their voice. So
Yeah.
those 6 areas are going to be the bedrock of our work over the next 5 years. And we're going to be busy, but
Yeah.
we're very excited about building on work that in many cases has already been underway, and then really wrapping our arms around this new area of child and youth mental health to see what good we can do there.
Yeah. As you know, I serve on the board. I happen to be the board chair this year anyway, following in Don Reese's footsteps, which is impossible to do, as the board chair for the Institute for Community Impact. And one of the things that we do is we each 3 or 4 months we have a breakfast and we bring in some, I'd say smaller. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
larger, but small up and coming or looking for that next, figure out how to take it to the next level nonprofits in and around Orange County with a strategic initiative or two. Sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's how to make my board stronger, sometimes it's how to get the word out more. There's a lot of things around those. What wisdom or advice would you share with, I mean, obviously you've got those 5 or 6 categories you talked
Mhm.
about, but you mentioned a word earlier on in this conversation about stewardship and how there's so many, every nonprofit needs funding. Every
Mhm.
nonprofit needs a stronger board. Every nonprofit needs more help with their strategy and their direction and their goals. From your experience of decades now of being in the philanthropic arena here in Orange County and in the world, what wisdom or advice would you pass along to some of those that might be just getting started or might be trying to figure out who they're going to be when they grow up or how they're
Sure.
going to get to $1 million in either grants or in receiving funding? What would you say?
Yeah. Well, a couple things come to mind. First of all, especially for executive directors of nascent or emerging nonprofits, it can be such a lonely path. So I would, really encourage folks to be building their relationship network. They may be able to partner with more established nonprofits and provide services or programs as part of a subcontract. It can be hard to win those larger grants, but if you can join some collaboratives or coalitions where you're benefiting from their infrastructure, their grant writing, and their relationships, as well as just learning from those that are a little bit farther down on the path. I'm also just such a huge believer in the importance of coaching, and we have some great programs locally, including Executive Coaches of Orange County, which provides absolutely pro bono, high quality. It's a very professionally run nonprofit that is all volunteer, and it was actually incubated at OCCF by one of our donors who has passed on now. But they are working with hundreds of local nonprofits, and it's having that coaching that was very important for me in my early years at Girls Inc., where it was my first time as an executive director. It was I had an executive coach, and through a program that's similar to executive coaches, and it was just game changing and life changing. And I felt like I had somebody. The problem with all nonprofits, but especially smaller ones, is everything is held by the executive director. You are trying to build a board. You don't want them micromanaging your organization, so you have to really be thoughtful about and strategic about what you're sharing and how you're keeping them focused on governance and not on all the nuts and bolts. And then you have a staff who you have to be supporting to get their heavy lift done. It's sort of very lonely in that position. And so finding colleagues, finding a network. When I was a brand new executive director, I formed a small kind of new executive directors group. We just met once a month on a Friday for lunch when we were just about to come undone and
Yeah.
supported one another so that, peer support from others a little bit farther down the road in their nonprofit leadership and their organizational development, and then availing yourself of coaching where the cost isn't a barrier. Those are things that come right to mind.
So if you were starting a nonprofit today with some issue or cause that breaks your heart, that's what you would do. You would get over just lean on peers and build kind of that network. Are there
Well,
other things that you would do?
that was advice for folks who'd already started.
Yeah.
If I hadn't started it yet, I would move heaven and earth to make sure that there really needed to be one more nonprofit. There are lots of options. There are amazing incubators and fiscal sponsors like charitable ventures that exist for the
Mhm.
purpose of somebody who has an idea to try it out, to see if they can seek partners before they've committed to hiring staff and putting a board together. This helps them really explore their idea and look for partners and see maybe their idea has a perfect partner out there somewhere and they're not. I've just seen so many folks struggle for years to get that critical mass and then they're just, having the years disappear from the end of their life trying to carry the stress of it. And there are some ideas or some new approaches that really need to be an independent nonprofit, but that isn't the first, I would say, the first answer that has to be. There are ways to test your idea out before you've committed to building infrastructure.
Yeah, to your point, there are a lot. I mean, a lot of causes out there doing a lot of similar things, and there's certainly a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
But find
And
find the one
and
that
it's
just
really hard to merge. I mean, there's always a lot of questions like, why don't more nonprofits merge? Goodness. Well, what drives mergers in the business world? Profit. I mean, there is, right?
exactly.
And so for nonprofits to merge, it's generally because there's a deficiency, a gap in leadership, a financial struggle. So you're entering the conversation already with maybe one weaker partner. It's rarely, there's just really not the model in the nonprofit space because there's no incentive. And what's
Yeah.
going on with all those board members and those staff members? And there are so many hurdles to, it's not impossible and it has been done and done well, but it's, once you have invested time and effort in building something, it's really hard to get folks to unwind it. And so if you can be really thoughtful about what is the best way to accomplish this mission, it may or may not be through a free, separately
Yeah.
incorporated nonprofit.
Well, and whoever's listening to this podcast within 10 miles of where you're sitting right now, there's a lot of options for hamburgers. And sometimes we go to the one that's closest, sometimes we go to the one that's the best price, sometimes we go because it's family owned and we love the family. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we support who we support. Same is true
That's
for
right.
nonprofits. There's a
So
lot of
true.
organizations doing a lot of wonderful things and go where your heart leads you, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
I have a couple more questions about OCCF, and then in the last few minutes we have, I want to touch a little bit about the book that you and I have
Oh, yeah,
worked on
sure.
together with 58 of our other close friends
Closest
around the
friends.
country, really. So I've got the how, why, what, and who questions for OCCF. How do people give? Why do they give?
Mm,
What do you need more that you're not getting? Kind of goes back to a question earlier on of what needs are not being met, and who does OCCF benefit?
yeah.
So wherever you want to go, maybe first
Wow.
just
Community foundations hold a really unique space, and there's typically kind of just one anchor in most regions in the country. So in California, there are 42 of us, so there's some overlap, but there's really one main community foundation for most counties. And we really serve as this point of intersection between donors who have a charitable capacity and the desire to be strategic and impactful. That's why people work with the community foundation. Either they want the support that we give and helping them direct and make the most of their giving, or they might have complex assets like real estate or business interests, and then we can help them monetize that so that they have more to give off their. Sometimes I think of us helping people translate their balance sheet as their philanthropic resources, not just what's coming through their income statement, their checkbook. So we kind of free up assets that would be difficult for most nonprofits to take. And then we help them find that perfect match, whether it's, again, locally or in their hometown or where they went to school. Or, many folks are worried about the, survival of our planet and issues
Mhm.
across the world. So we are their partners in that. And then, of course, we're a partner for local nonprofits through our own initiatives and their capacity in the many grant programs that we run on behalf of our donors who've passed on or who've set up a grant program and said, please go find the best nonprofits that match this. So really, I think what the community foundation needs to be successful is just those expanding circles of individuals, families, for the most part, sometimes family businesses, who really want to be thoughtful about their giving, want to maximize both its magnitude and its impact, and nonprofit partners who are part of the work that we are focusing on. And I just don't think, we can ever have enough of both kinds of partners. That's what helps us to grow. And all of those partners bring their knowledge, their wisdom, their aspirations, and that flavors our direction. So it's a completely interdependent process. And I suppose if I could wave one magic wand, it would be a better way to describe what we do, or a shorter way or a more incisive way, because community foundations are inherently sort of, like that the old joke about the, committee describing the elephant. We have so many different roles. We provide scholarships. We're a grant maker. We're a donor sort of concierge and support team. We're an investment manager where we're investing the resources. We have a huge finance, accounting, and IT team doing all kinds of that stewardship work. We are often asked to be thought leaders and help people think through ideas. There are so many aspects to the work that I do every once in a while, have a little wistfulness about, oh, when I was at Orangewood or Girls Inc., it was a much clearer story to
Oh, it's
tell.
easier, right?
This is
Yeah.
our mission, this
Yeah.
is who we serve. And we're sort of like the Ethel and Lucy episode when they're trying to get the job, and the employment woman is saying, well, what can you do? And they say, well, what do you need? And so, well, what can you do? Well, what do you need? Sometimes I feel that's our work, is to just really be constantly listening for what donors need, what community partners need, what nonprofits need, what our broader Orange County community needs, and trying to step into that and bring our strength where we're best suited to help.
How do people reach you if they want to learn more about
Oh,
OCCF and
golly.
everything you're doing?
Every single one of our emails are on our website. I'm sure, to the chagrin of my IT people, our phone number is there. There's an info at. We keep our website very up to date, so you can go on. You can learn more about our Vision 2030. There's places to sign up to, learn, share, or give, so people can engage with that part of our work, and or just call the front desk and ask for me and somebody who can help. That's something I do love about community foundations, is we're highly accessible. So, we want to hear from folks.
So in the years that I've known you, Shelley, one thing I have known about you is that you're very passionate about what you do and you love what you do. Two-part question.
Yeah.
Why? That's part one. Part two, talk to the person out there right now who isn't in love with their job the way you are. What advice would you give somebody? Some people work for the paycheck to support the family,
Yeah.
and that's great and that's fantastic, and that's a lot of people, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't change that. Some people work because they have a passion, but they're not able to support the family. And then
Yeah.
there's those of you who are lucky enough that you get to do both. You get to love what you do and make a living and
Yeah.
make an impact. So why do you love what you do so much? And then what advice would you give to somebody who maybe isn't where you are?
Well, that's just easy. I mean, how could you help loving what, it's just, I've said often, especially with, a time of great challenge for our world and our country and our community. Um, I personally think philanthropy is the most exciting and challenging and inspiring place to be, because we have the most freedom. The resources sort of in magnitude pale in comparison to government, but goodness, I wouldn't give up any of the freedom, the autonomy that we have to speak what we see, to advocate for the needs of our community. And then within the field of philanthropy, I wouldn't want to be anything more than I would want to be a community foundation, because of this sort of living in this intersection of all of this, the goodwill and intentions of donors and where the work is happening, and to be an accelerant and, a cheerleader and a champion for the best work in our community. And then if you got to be a community foundation in the field of philanthropy, I would pick Orange County over every other place in the known universe, because of what I shared earlier, that our donor community are largely first generation self-made. They have so much empathy and motivation to help others rise. Our annual meeting that we're hosting this week, our theme is Together We Rise, the power of community. And the power of community is really our calling card for our next 5 years. And that is literally our middle name. And I literally love everything about our work, and that I get to be a part of it, and I get to wake up every day knowing that I'm doing something that matters. I feel so ridiculously blessed by this opportunity.
Well, it shows. It carries over. Just when I see you out in the community, like I did last week at the philanthropy day, just that radiates a good word. You radiate kindness and giving and love, and
Oh,
it's just
thank you.
really fun to
Yeah.
see.
And I don't want to forget the second part of your
Right.
question, which, not everyone has the opportunity or the choice. You said some people, you have to put food on the table, and that might not be your passion, but it might be the best opportunity that you have professionally. And then I think you find your passion, alongside that,
Yeah.
in your, as they say, your 5 to 9, in your evenings, your weekends, what you do with your family, where you pour your heart. It doesn't have to just be about what you do in your your daily job. Of course, I do think it's ideal for people who haven't settled into their career yet, if they have an option to think about where, their passion meets their skill set. You have to have both. You can't just be excited about something. If you don't actually have the skill set that supports that, then that won't lead to the best outcome. But and you just mentioned the case where maybe someone has a skill set, they don't have the passion. So of course I spend a lot of time talking to grad students and early career stage folks that are still having that choice available to them. I really advocate to lean in.
I like that. You look at your 9 to 5 and then your 5 to 9. I jotted
Yeah.
that down a little bit. All right, I got
Yeah.
one more question for you, then I'll
Okay.
shift real
Cool.
fast to talking about boomer wisdom a little bit.
Sure, sure.
And the question is simply, what breaks your heart?
Well, I mean, I think really certainly some of the issues that we touched on
Yeah.
earlier. I think what's breaking my heart right now is where I see needless pain. When I see that either intentional actions, whether individual or institutional, where a different choice could lessen someone's pain, their vulnerability, their hopelessness, that just breaks my heart. When there are some things that are out of our control that are, forces of the, physical world or, other realities. But when there is sort of pointless pain, pointless vulnerability, I would say I have to say that is what breaks my heart the most.
Well, thank you for doing something about it.
Well, my
Yeah.
little bit. And thank you so much for this conversation, Ed. I know we went a lot of unexpected places, but
Most of my conversations do. And that's what I love about, that's what I
well,
love
you're a
about
great
doing this.
interviewer. You're
Well,
you're
I
great
appreciate
at
that.
opening
I
people up.
love the somebody joked that I should write a book called The Art of Conversation, but put an H in front of the A, so the Hart is my last name. So I've
I love
actually toyed
it.
with that a little bit. Not that I'm an expert on conversation, but I do love people and I love hearing stories, and
Well, see, that's the great thing about art. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to do it.
it's an art. Yeah. I mean, I've done some of these sip and paint things with my wife, and number one, I have no artistic capability, and number two, I'm colorblind, but I've been really happy with how some of my paintings have turned out. They're hanging in my garage for no one to see, but nevertheless,
Hey, we can
for
we as children we knew how to sing and dance and
oh yeah.
paint and all of those things we eventually stopped doing
The
because
world, the
someone
world
tells
taught
us
us to stop, right?
that yeah that you're not good at that. So good for you. Keep
It's
sipping and
crazy.
painting and conversating.
Well, I appreciate that. So, last thing, I'll take just a minute on this. 2 years ago, for those that don't know, I had this idea of creating a book. Dr. Ken Blanchard, who's one of my mentors, inspired this and has participated in this. It's this book called Boomer Wisdom, Lessons for the Next Generation. And I decided to solicit 58, Ken Blanchard, myself, and 58 others to each write a chapter to the next generation. And all I asked each person was, what wisdom or advice would you like to pass along to the next gen? And I didn't give it a second question after that because I didn't want the chapters to overlap. Shelley was kind enough to contribute and wrote an amazing chapter, which is found in the middle of the book. Right now, it's on page 165 of a book that's about 300 pages. So it's going to change because that's based on alphabet. We're changing the book up with the editors right now to be more structured by theme. So I'm not sure exactly where it's going to lie in the book when it's all said and done. The title of your chapter might be a working title, might be the title we go with is Leading with Intention. I know you said that you read a little bit of what you wrote earlier today, just so it would be in your mind. When you think about leading with intention, rather than going through your whole chapter here in the few minutes we have left, what do you mean with leading with intention?
Well, I think to be if we look back, I think I actually titled it "Leading with Love," so I might
Okay.
speak to that. I think
Okay,
maybe
good.
there I had one of your editors in the earlier process
Well, we're
that
going to change that to
better.
leading with love because I like that word better a whole
Oh,
lot
that's
more
the
than
book I
intention.
will write someday, maybe
There
if
you
I ever
go.
get a chance. It was a great invitation, by the way, to reflect. And I was thinking this morning, gosh, I wonder what chapter, if I wrote it now, would it be different?
Right. I wrote mine like two
Just
years
with
ago. I've thought about that too.
yeah, just with fresh perspective that we gain. And one of my themes was about being a lifelong learner, and I guess that sort of sums up everything in the chapter, which is how important it is to continue to cultivate a beginner's mind and I'm 62, I've had a nearly 40-year career, and I am learning every single day from the folks that I work with, our board, my colleagues, my circle of longtime friends and associates in the Orange County community, and so a couple of things that I wrote about were always having that learning mind, but also recognizing when the moment is at hand to be bold. That idea of confidence. Sometimes we just have to step out in faith and know we're going to be equal to this challenge. It doesn't always feel comfortable when you're in a leadership role and you often feel out of your depth. That was one of the best pieces of advice I got early in this role was, you're on the horse, so you better write it. That was really helpful to me to say, okay, I'm going to do my best. And it turns out for most of us, our best is just fine. Our best does the job. And that was very, very helpful. I also wrote about one of the lessons I've learned that's really hard in the nonprofit world because we want to, feel like we're family and we want to lead with, what feels like love. But also, truth is love. And one of the sections I wrote was about directness.
I
And
just underlined that. That's where I was going next.
yeah, so I taught for a number of years in a seminar course at Stanford, a case study course, and the professor would always start the course with this quote, directness is not unkindness. And I was like, oh man, boy, did I need that earlier in my career when I was pussyfooting around and beating around the bush and didn't really want to say something difficult. The folks that I respect the most now as I've grown in my leadership are those who can say a hard thing, not with cruelty, not with negative intentions, but I've found that if you have the right intention for someone's growth and for them to improve and them to take something of value, saying even a hard thing it's certainly something that I look back in my own life and appreciate greatly when people had that courage.
Yeah, and the line that I underlined in that section was you don't do your peers or employees any favors when you lack the courage to tell it like it is.
That's right.
And I always say some of my favorite people are the people that are authentic and to the point. And it is hard. Sometimes getting feedback is hard, but you're right. I mean, you don't do anybody any favors by dancing around the issue. And just you talk a lot in your book in your chapter as well about one of my favorite terms, and it comes up all over this book, and that's servant leadership. And sometimes serving a person isn't how can I help you and go get you a cup of coffee or hand you a Kleenex when you sneeze. Sometimes service
Yeah.
can be being
Putting
direct
yourself
with
out
it.
there, being honest. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Wow.
Well, Shelley, I can't express enough. I've tried over the last hour plus to express my gratitude to you, not only for our friendship and for the time today with you, but just for the impact and the influence that you are. I mean, I know everybody who knows you loves you and learns from you, and when your name comes up in conversation, it's always people recognizing the good that you do, that Orange County Community
Oh,
Foundation is doing, and just
thank
that
you.
that um, that leadership. You really do have a leadership role within not just Orange County, but I think around the world when it comes to philanthropy, and
Oh,
I think we could bring you in to teach CEOs all over the world how to lead their companies. So I appreciate you as a
oh,
friend, as a
thank you. And
leader.
that's so dear. Thank you. And like I said, I just feel so grateful. And if I radiate that, it's because I do truly love and appreciate and have eternal gratitude for the opportunity to do this good work with good people like you.
Well, it's a privilege and a pleasure for me to get a chance to work with you and to have you on the From the Heart podcast again. And
Thank you.
for those listening and watching, I hope that you will act on the things that you heard today. Shelley shared some great wisdom with us on where to make the biggest impact. Follow your heart, follow where the spirit, as she mentioned, takes you. There are a lot of great areas where you can serve, and that spot that might be in your mind right now is probably the right place. So I encourage anybody listening or watching to follow your heart and go act today. Go do something for someone else. Go serve somebody today, because that's ultimately, I believe, why we're here. It's that gift that we have that we're supposed to give to others. So, Shelley, thank you for sharing your gift with us today.